Captain Marcus had been standing guard at the palace gates for over 10 years. His tall frame cast a long shadow in the morning sun as he watched the busy street beyond the iron bars. People hurried past with their daily business, never daring to look directly at him or the other guards. The morning had started like any other. Marcus checked his pocket watch, 9:30. The changing of the guard would happen in 3 hours, and he was already thinking about his warm meal and rest. His leather boots were polished to perfection, his uniform pressed and spotless. The king demanded nothing less than absolute perfection from his royal guards. A gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh bread from the nearby bakery. Marcus's stomach growled softly, reminding him that he had only eaten a small breakfast before his shift. But hunger was something a royal guard learned to ignore. Duty came first, always. The sound of approaching footsteps made him straighten his already perfect posture. A young girl, no more than 12 years old, was walking slowly toward the gate. Her clothes were simple, a worn brown dress and a thin shawl wrapped around her shoulders. What caught Marcus's attention was her face. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and she kept wiping them away with the back of her small hand. Marcus had seen many people approach the palace gates over the years. Most came with requests, complaints, or desperate pleas for help. The protocol was clear. No one without official business could pass through the gates. No exceptions. The guards were not supposed to engage in conversation with common folk unless it was absolutely necessary. The girl stopped just a few feet away from where Marcus stood. She looked up at him with red, swollen eyes. Her bottom lip trembled as she tried to speak, but no words came out. Instead, fresh tears began to flow down her dirty cheeks. "Please," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible above the street noise. "I need to see someone inside. It's very important." Marcus felt something stir in his chest, but he pushed the feeling away. Rules were rules. He had seen countless children, men and women, cry at these gates. Emotional appeals were common, and guards were trained to remain unmoved by them. "State your business," Marcus said in his official tone, neither kind nor harsh. "Do you have an appointment or official documentation?" The girl shook her head, causing more tears to fall. "No, sir, but please listen to me. My mother sent me here. She said I had to find the tall guard with the scar on his left hand." She pointed directly at Marcus's left hand, where a thin white scar ran from his wrist to his knuckle. Marcus felt his blood run cold. Very few people knew about that scar, and even fewer would think to mention it. He had gotten it during his first year of service when he accidentally cut himself while cleaning his sword. How could this child possibly know about it? "Who is your mother?" Marcus asked, his voice now carrying a note of curiosity despite his training. "Her name is Sarah Mitchell. She used to work in the palace kitchens many years ago." The girl's voice grew stronger as she spoke. "She told me to tell you that the roses in the East Garden still bloom every spring." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. The roses in the East Garden, that was something only Sarah would know to say. It was their secret code from years ago, when they were young and foolish and thought love could conquer the difference between a kitchen maid and a palace guard. Marcus looked around quickly to make sure no other guards were watching him closely. His hands began to shake slightly, something that hadn't happened since his first day of duty. Sarah. After all these years, she was reaching out to him. But why now? And why through her daughter? The girl seemed to notice the change in his expression. "She said you would remember," she continued, her voice now urgent. "She said to tell you that she never forgot the promise you made under the cherry tree." Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, transported back 15 years to a night when he was just a young guard, and Sarah was a beautiful kitchen maid with dreams of a different life. They had met in secret in the palace gardens, always careful not to be seen. He remembered the cherry tree where he had promised her that someday, when he had saved enough money and earned enough rank, he would marry her and take her away from the palace. But life had other plans. Sarah had disappeared one night without explanation. Marcus had searched for her for months, but it was as if she had vanished into thin air. Eventually, he had forced himself to stop looking and focus on his career. Now he was captain of the guard, but the promotion felt hollow without her to share it with. "What does your mother want?" Marcus asked, his professional training warring with his personal emotions. The girl reached into her small cloth bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "She wrote you a letter, but she said I should tell you the most important part first." The child took a deep breath as if preparing herself for something difficult. My mother is very sick. The doctor says she doesn't have much time left. She wanted to see you one more time before... The girl couldn't finish the sentence. Marcus felt the world spin around him. Sarah was dying and she wanted to see him. After 15 years of silence, she was reaching out in her final days. The letter in the girl's hand seemed to burn with importance, but accepting the letter would mean breaking protocol. Guards were not supposed to receive personal messages while on duty. They were not supposed to have personal relationships that could interfere with their duties. Marcus had spent years building his reputation as the most disciplined and reliable guard in the palace. The girl held out the letter with trembling hands. "Please, sir," she said, "you were the only person who ever truly understood her. She said she had something very important to tell you, something she should have told you years ago." Marcus stared at the folded paper. One simple action, reaching out and taking it, would change everything. But the girl's tears and the mention of Sarah's illness made his heart ache in a way he hadn't felt for years. The sound of approaching horse hooves reminded him that he was still on duty, still being watched. Whatever decision he made in the next few seconds would determine not only his future, but possibly Sarah's peace in her final days. Marcus looked around one more time, then quickly reached out and took the letter from the girl's small hands. The paper felt warm against his palm and he could smell a faint trace of lavender, the same perfume Sarah used to wear when they met in the gardens. "What is your name, child?" he asked softly. "Emma," she replied, wiping her nose with her sleeve. "Emma Mitchell." Marcus tucked the letter inside his uniform jacket, close to his heart. "Emma, I need you to go straight home to your mother. Tell her that Captain Marcus received her message." He paused, struggling with emotions he had buried for years. "Tell her that I remember everything." Emma's face brightened with hope. "Does that mean you'll come to see her?" Before Marcus could answer, Lieutenant Hayes approached from inside the gate. Hayes was a younger guard, ambitious and always eager to report any irregularities to the higher-ups. Marcus straightened his shoulders and tried to look as official as possible. "Is there a problem here, Captain?" Hayes asked, eyeing Emma suspiciously. "Just a lost child asking for directions," Marcus replied smoothly. "I was instructing her on the proper way back to the market district." Hayes nodded, apparently satisfied with the explanation. "The morning report is ready for your review, sir." "I'll be right there," Marcus said. He looked down at Emma and spoke in his official voice again. "Run along now, child. Follow the main road straight back to where you came from." Emma understood the hidden message. She nodded quickly and hurried away, her small feet pattering against the cobblestones. Marcus watched her until she disappeared around the corner, then followed Hayes back toward the guard station. Once inside the stone building, Marcus tried to focus on his duties. He reviewed the night reports, checked the duty rosters, and inspected the weapons inventory. But the letter seemed to burn against his chest, and his mind kept drifting to Sarah. What could be so important that she would risk sending her daughter to the palace? What secret had she kept for 15 years? During his lunch break, Marcus found a quiet corner of the barracks and carefully opened the letter. Sarah's handwriting was still as beautiful as he remembered, though it looked shakier now. "My dearest Marcus," the letter began. "If you are reading this, then Emma found you successfully. I pray you will forgive me for the pain I caused you all those years ago. I had to leave suddenly and I couldn't explain why. The truth is I was carrying a child, our child. The palace would never have allowed a guard to marry a pregnant kitchen maid. We both would have lost our positions and our baby would have had no future." Marcus had to stop reading. His hands were shaking so violently that the paper rustled loudly. Emma was his daughter. The girl who had approached the gate with tears in her eyes was his own flesh and blood. 15 years ago, when Sarah disappeared, she had been pregnant with his child. He forced himself to continue reading. "I went to live with my aunt in a village far from the capital. I told everyone that my husband had died in an accident, and Emma grew up believing her father was a hero who died before she was born. I never remarried, Marcus. My heart belonged to you and I couldn't give it to anyone else." The letter went on to explain that Sarah had been diagnosed with a serious illness 3 months earlier. The doctors had tried everything, but her condition was getting worse. She was writing the letter because she wanted Marcus to know the truth before she died, and she hoped he would watch over Emma after she was gone. "Emma is intelligent and kind, just like her father," Sarah wrote. "She doesn't know who you really are yet. I wanted to tell you first and let you decide how much she should know. If you choose not to be part of her life, I will understand. But if you are willing, she will need someone to take care of her when I am gone. My aunt is too old now, and I have no other family." The letter ended with an address in the old part of the city and a plea for Marcus to visit, even if just once. Marcus folded the letter carefully and put it back in his jacket. His entire world had changed in the space of a few minutes. He was a father. He had a daughter who had been living just a few miles away for her entire life, and he had never known. The afternoon dragged by slowly. Marcus went through the motions of his duties, but his mind was elsewhere. He kept thinking about Emma's face, looking for resemblances he had missed. She had his dark hair and his stubborn chin. How had he not seen it immediately? As the sun began to set, Marcus made his decision. He would request emergency leave and visit Sarah that very evening. The captain of the guard was allowed 3 personal days per year without prior notice, and Marcus had never used any of his. His second in command could handle the night shift. At 6 o'clock, Marcus changed out of his uniform and into civilian clothes. He hadn't worn regular clothing in months, and it felt strange to walk through the city without his official badge and sword. The address Sarah had given him led to a run-down neighborhood where small houses were crowded together along narrow streets. He found the right house easily. It was the only one with a small garden in front, and Marcus could see the lavender plants that explained the scent on the letter. He stood at the door for several minutes trying to find the courage to knock. Finally, he raised his hand and tapped gently on the wooden door. Footsteps approached from inside, and the door opened slowly. Emma stood there, her eyes wide with surprise. "Captain Marcus?" she said uncertainly. "You came?" Behind her, a weak voice called out, "Emma, who is it?" "It's him, Mother," Emma called back. "The guard from the palace. He came to see you." Marcus heard a sharp intake of breath from inside the house, then Sarah's voice again, stronger now. "Let him in, sweetheart." Emma stepped aside and Marcus entered the small, clean house. The main room was simply furnished but welcoming, with fresh flowers on the table and books stacked neatly on shelves. And there, sitting in a chair by the window, was Sarah. She was thinner than he remembered, and her hair had streaks of gray. But her eyes were still the same warm brown that had captivated him years ago. When she saw him, tears began to flow down her cheeks. "Marcus," she whispered, "you really came." He crossed the room in 3 quick steps and knelt beside her chair. Without thinking about protocols or propriety, he took her hands in his. They were cold and thin, but they were still Sarah's hands. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Why didn't you let me choose?" Sarah squeezed his hands gently, her touch as familiar as if no time had passed at all. "I was so young and scared," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You were just starting to build your career, and I knew the palace rules. If they had discovered our relationship in the pregnancy, you would have been dismissed immediately. All your dreams of becoming a captain would have been ruined." Marcus shook his head. "Those dreams meant nothing without you." "I couldn't let you sacrifice everything for me," Sarah continued. "I thought I was protecting you, protecting our future. I planned to wait until you were established in your position, then find a way to tell you about Emma. But years passed, and it became harder and harder to reach out. I was afraid you had forgotten me or found someone else." Emma had been standing quietly near the door, listening to their conversation with growing confusion. Now she stepped forward, her young face creased with worry. "Mother," she said hesitantly, "I don't understand. Why is the guard holding your hands? Why are you both crying?" Sarah and Marcus looked at each other, then at Emma. The moment of truth had arrived sooner than either of them had expected. "Emma, sweetheart," Sarah said gently, "please sit down. There's something very important I need to tell you." Emma perched on the edge of a small wooden stool, her dark eyes moving between her mother and Marcus. "Am I in trouble for going to the palace?" "No, darling," Sarah said. "You did exactly what I asked you to do. But now I need to tell you something I should have told you years ago." She took a deep breath. "The story I told you about your father isn't completely true." Emma's eyes widened. "He didn't die in an accident?" "Your father is very much alive," Sarah said softly. "He's sitting right here with us." Emma stared at Marcus for a long moment, her young mind trying to process this information. "The guard is my father?" Marcus felt his heart break and mend at the same time. "Yes," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm your father, Emma. I just learned about you today when you brought me your mother's letter." Emma stood up abruptly and backed away from both of them. "That's impossible," she said, shaking her head. "My father was a hero. He was brave and kind and good. You're just a palace guard who follows orders." The words stung, but Marcus understood her reaction. In her mind, her father had been a perfect memory, a hero who died young. Now she was being told that he was a real person with flaws and complications. "Emma," Sarah said firmly, "Marcus is all of those things you said about your father. He is brave and kind and good, and he is a hero. He's protected the royal family and our city for many years." But Emma wasn't ready to listen. "If he's really my father," she said, her voice rising, "then why wasn't he here when I was sick with fever last winter? Why wasn't he here when the other children teased me for not having a father? Why wasn't he here to teach me to read and write?" Each question hit Marcus like a physical blow. He thought about all the moments he had missed. Emma's first steps, her first words, her birthdays, her childhood illnesses. 15 years of fatherhood stolen from him, and now his daughter saw him as a stranger. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "If I had known about you, nothing would have kept me away. Nothing." Emma looked at him with tears in her eyes. "But you didn't know because you didn't care enough to find out where Mother went." Marcus realized that Emma was right, at least partially. He had searched for Sarah, but he had eventually given up and accepted that she was gone. He had chosen his career and his duty over continuing to look for the woman he loved. "You're right," he admitted. "I should have looked harder. I should have never stopped trying to find your mother." Sarah reached out and took Emma's hand. "Emma, I made the choice to leave and keep our secret. If anyone is to blame, it's me. Marcus didn't even know I was pregnant." Emma pulled her hand away from her mother's grasp. "You both lied to me," she said, her voice breaking. "My whole life has been a lie." She ran toward the door, but Marcus stood up and gently blocked her path. "Please don't run away," he said. "I know this is confusing and upsetting, but we're your parents. We both love you even though we made mistakes." Emma looked up at him, studying his face carefully. "You really didn't know about me?" "I swear to you I had no idea," Marcus said. "If I had known, I would have moved heaven and earth to be part of your life." Something in his voice must have convinced her, because Emma's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Mother is really dying, isn't she?" Marcus looked at Sarah, who nodded sadly. "The doctor says I have maybe 2 or 3 months left," she said. Emma began to cry again, but this time she didn't pull away when Marcus reached out to comfort her. He knelt down so he was at her eye level and spoke gently. "I know this is all very sudden and frightening," he said. "You don't have to call me father or think of me as your father right away. But I want you to know that from this moment forward, you will never be alone. I will take care of you and I will be here whenever you need me." "But you're a palace guard," Emma said. "You have to live at the palace and follow orders. You can't take care of a child." Marcus realized that she was right about this too. Palace guards lived in barracks and had very little personal freedom. They were expected to be available for duty at all times. How could he possibly raise a daughter while maintaining his position? "I'll figure something out," he said. "Maybe I can find a position that allows me to live outside the palace, or maybe I can arrange for you to live nearby where I can see you every day." Sarah shook her head weakly. "Marcus, you can't give up your career for us again. You've worked too hard to become captain." But Marcus had already made his decision. He looked at Sarah and then at Emma, and he knew what was most important. "I lost 15 years with my daughter because I chose duty over family," he said firmly. "I won't make that mistake again. Emma is more important than any position or title." Emma wiped her eyes and looked at him with something that might have been the beginning of trust. "Would you really do that for me? Give up being captain?" "I would do anything for you," Marcus said. "You're my daughter, and I love you already even though I just met you." For the first time since learning the truth, Emma smiled slightly. "I guess you do look a little bit like me," she said. "We both have the same stubborn chin." Sarah laughed softly, the first happy sound she had made all evening. "That's exactly what I used to tell myself when you were a baby. You would scrunch up your little face when you didn't get your way, and you looked just like your father." Marcus felt a warmth spreading through his chest. Maybe it wasn't too late after all. Maybe he could still be the father Emma needed, even if he had missed her early years. Over the next few weeks, Marcus found himself living a double life. During the day, he performed his duties as captain of the guard with the same dedication as always. But every evening he hurried to Sarah's small house to spend time with his newfound family. Emma was slowly warming up to him, though she was still cautious. She would ask him questions about palace life and listen with wide eyes as he told her stories about state ceremonies and royal visitors. In return, she shared stories about her life, her favorite books, her friends at the market, her dreams of someday traveling to distant lands. Sarah grew weaker each day, but she seemed happier than she had been in years. She would sit in her chair by the window and watch as Marcus and Emma talked or played simple games together. Sometimes she would tell them stories about when she and Marcus were young, carefully editing out the more romantic details for Emma's sake. One evening, as Emma was preparing for bed, she surprised Marcus with a question. "If you're really my father," she said, "does that mean I'm part royal, since you protect the royal family?" Marcus couldn't help but smile. "No, sweetheart. I work for the royal family, but that doesn't make us royal. We're still just regular people." "Oh," Emma said, sounding slightly disappointed. Then she brightened. "But that means I could visit you at the palace sometimes, right? Since you're the captain?" Marcus felt his stomach tighten. He hadn't told Emma or Sarah about his plan to leave the palace guard. He had been researching other options: jobs in the city watch, private security positions, even work as a blacksmith or carpenter. Anything that would allow him to be a proper father to Emma. "We'll see," he said diplomatically. "There are rules about visitors to the palace." But Emma was persistent. "Could you show me where you work just once? I've always wondered what it looks like inside those big walls." Sarah, who had been listening from her chair, spoke up. "Emma, don't pester Marcus about the palace. He has important work to do there." "It's all right," Marcus said. "Maybe someday I can arrange for a brief visit." The next morning, Marcus was reviewing security reports when Lieutenant Hayes approached his desk with an unusual expression on his face. "Captain," Hayes said carefully, "I need to speak with you about a personal matter." Marcus looked up from his papers. "What is it, Lieutenant?" Hayes glanced around to make sure they were alone, then leaned closer. "Sir, I've noticed that you've been leaving the barracks every evening for the past few weeks. You've also seemed distracted during some of your duties." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "Are you questioning my performance, Lieutenant?" "No, sir," Hayes said quickly. "Your work is still exemplary, but some of the other guards have noticed your change in routine. There's been talk." "What kind of talk?" Hayes looked uncomfortable. "Some are saying you might have a woman friend in the city. Others think you might be involved in some kind of business venture. I wanted to warn you before the rumors reach higher authorities." Marcus realized that his secret visits to Sarah and Emma were becoming harder to hide. Palace guards were expected to be completely dedicated to their duties, with no outside relationships or obligations. If the palace discovered that he had a family, especially a family he had been hiding, it could mean immediate dismissal and possibly even charges of deception. "Thank you for the warning," Marcus said carefully. "I'll be more mindful of appearances." But Hayes wasn't finished. "Captain, if you don't mind me saying so, you seem happier lately. More human, I suppose. Whatever is drawing you away from the palace in the evenings, it's good for you." Marcus was surprised by the younger man's observation. "What do you mean?" "You've always been an excellent captain," Hayes explained, "but you've also been distant and cold. Lately you seem more approachable. You smile occasionally. You're more patient with the new recruits. The men have noticed, and they respect you even more for it." That evening, Marcus shared Hayes's warning with Sarah. She was having one of her better days and was able to sit up in bed while Emma helped her with her evening meal. "Maybe you shouldn't come here so often," Sarah said, though her voice betrayed how much the suggestion hurt her. "I don't want to be the reason you lose your position." "I'm not going to lose my position," Marcus said firmly, "because I'm going to resign." Both Sarah and Emma stared at him in shock. "Marcus, no," Sarah said. "You can't throw away everything you've worked for." "I've already made up my mind," Marcus said. "I've been looking into other opportunities. The City Watch is hiring experienced officers, and the pay is almost as good as what I make now." "I could live in a regular house and have normal hours," Emma looked confused. "But I thought being captain of the guard was important." "Wouldn't you miss protecting the king and queen?" Marcus sat down on the edge of Sarah's bed and took Emma's hands in his. "Emma, I need to tell you something about what it means to be a father. A father's first duty is to his family, not to his job. I spent 15 years putting my career first, and I missed out on watching you grow up. I won't make that mistake again." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. But what if the city watch position doesn't work out? What if you can't find another job? You'll have given up everything for nothing. It won't be for nothing, Marcus said. It will be for Emma, and for you, for whatever time we have left. Emma suddenly threw her arms around Marcus's neck. You really would do that for me? I would do anything for you, Marcus said, hugging her tightly. You're my daughter, and I love you more than any job or title. Over the next few days, Marcus began making discreet inquiries about resignation procedures. He learned that palace guards who left their positions were required to give 30 days' notice and undergo an extensive interview process to ensure they weren't leaving to work for enemies of the crown. Meanwhile, Sarah's condition took a turn for the worse. She was sleeping more during the day and eating very little. The local doctor visited twice and quietly told Marcus that Sarah probably had less than a month left. Emma seemed to sense that her mother was getting sicker, and she became more clingy and emotional. She would sit beside Sarah's bed for hours, reading to her or just holding her hand. Sometimes Marcus would find them both asleep, Emma's head resting on her mother's shoulder. One evening, as Marcus was preparing to leave for his night shift, Sarah called him over to her bedside. I need to ask you something, she said weakly. When I'm gone, what will you tell Emma about us? About our relationship when we were young? Marcus hadn't thought about this. Emma knew that her parents had loved each other, but she didn't know the details of their secret romance or why they had never married. What would you like me to tell her? He asked. Sarah smiled sadly. Tell her that we loved each other very much, but that sometimes adults make difficult choices for reasons that seem right at the time. Tell her that our love for each other gave us the most precious gift in the world, her. I will, Marcus promised. And Marcus, Sarah continued, promise me that you won't let guilt consume you. We both made choices that seemed right at the time. We can't change the past, but we can make sure Emma has a good future. Marcus leaned down and kissed Sarah's forehead gently. I promise, he whispered. As he walked back to the palace that night, Marcus realized that his old life was truly ending. Soon he would no longer be Captain Marcus of the Royal Guard. Instead, he would be simply Marcus, Emma's father, Sarah's love, and a man trying to build a new life from the pieces of his old one. 2 weeks later, Marcus was called to an unexpected meeting with the palace administrator, Lord Chancellor Whitmore. Marcus had only spoken to Whitmore a handful of times during his career, and always about serious security matters. As he walked through the marble corridors toward the administrative offices, Marcus wondered if someone had discovered his secret. Whitmore's office was grand and intimidating, with tall windows overlooking the royal gardens. The chancellor was a thin, sharp-faced man who had served 3 different kings during his long career. He looked up from his papers as Marcus entered and gestured to a chair across from his massive desk. Captain Marcus, Whitmore said, his voice formal but not unfriendly. Please sit down. I've called you here to discuss an unusual opportunity. Marcus sat carefully, his mind racing. An opportunity, my lord? As you know, Whitmore continued, the kingdom has been expanding its diplomatic relationships with neighboring countries. We're planning to establish a new embassy in the coastal province of Millhaven, about 50 miles from here. The position requires someone with exceptional security expertise and unquestionable loyalty. Marcus listened carefully, unsure where this conversation was leading. The ambassador's chief of security would be responsible for protecting our diplomatic staff and maintaining relationships with local law enforcement, Whitmore explained. It's a prestigious position that comes with a significant salary increase and, most importantly, the right to live outside the palace and maintain a normal family life. Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. A normal family life, my lord? Whitmore smiled slightly. Captain, you've served the crown with distinction for 15 years. Your record is flawless and your dedication is unquestionable, but palace service requires sacrifices that not every man is meant to make forever. Sometimes our best officers need the opportunity to build lives beyond these walls. Marcus stared at the chancellor, wondering if this was some kind of test. I'm not sure I understand, my lord. I understand you've been making inquiries about resignation procedures, Whitmore said gently. Before you make such a drastic decision, I wanted to offer you this alternative. Marcus felt his cheeks flush. My lord, I can explain. Whitmore held up a hand to stop him. Captain, you don't need to explain anything to me. A man's private life is his own business as long as it doesn't interfere with his duties, and your duties have never suffered. How did you know about my inquiries? It's my job to know what's happening in the palace, Whitmore said. It's also my job to recognize when good men are struggling with difficult decisions. The Millhaven position would allow you to continue serving the crown, while also having the freedom to pursue personal happiness. Marcus could hardly believe what he was hearing. When would this position begin? Within the month, if you're interested, Whitmore replied. Millhaven is a pleasant coastal town with good schools and a thriving community. It would be an excellent place to raise a family. The mention of schools made Marcus think immediately of Emma. She was bright and curious, but her education had been limited to what Sarah could teach her at home. In Millhaven, she could attend proper schools and have opportunities she would never have in their current situation. May I have time to consider the offer? Marcus asked. Of course, Whitmore said, but don't take too long. The embassy opens in 6 weeks and we need time to transition you into the role. That evening, Marcus rushed to Sarah's house with the news. He found Emma sitting beside her mother's bed, reading aloud from a book of fairy tales. Sarah was awake but very weak, her breathing shallow and labored. How are you feeling today? Marcus asked, kissing Sarah's forehead gently. Better now that you're here, she whispered. Emma has been taking good care of me. Emma beamed at the praise. I made Mother some tea with honey, and I read her 3 whole stories. Marcus sat down on the other side of the bed and shared Whitmore's offer with them. As he described the position in the town of Millhaven, he watched Emma's eyes grow wide with excitement. The ocean? Emma said breathlessly. There would be an ocean nearby? Yes, Marcus said, smiling at her enthusiasm. And good schools and other children your age. Sarah squeezed his hand weakly. It sounds wonderful, Marcus. Almost too good to be true. There's something else, Marcus said carefully. The position comes with a house large enough for a family. Emma could live with me there. Emma looked between her parents uncertainly. But what about Mother? Marcus and Sarah exchanged a glance. They both knew that Sarah wouldn't live long enough to make the move to Millhaven. But neither wanted to say this directly to Emma. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, Sarah said gently. The important thing is that you and your father will have a chance to build a proper life together. Emma crawled closer to her mother on the bed. I don't want to leave you, Mother. Sarah stroked Emma's hair with a trembling hand. Sweetheart, the most important thing to me is knowing that you'll be safe and happy. Your father can give you opportunities that I never could. Over the next few days, Marcus found himself torn between excitement about the new opportunity and worry about Sarah's declining health. She was sleeping almost constantly now, and when she was awake, she seemed to exist in a haze of pain and exhaustion. Emma had become remarkably mature for her age, taking care of many household tasks and never leaving her mother's side for long. She would hold Sarah's hand and sing quiet songs, or tell her about things she had seen in the market that day. One morning, Marcus arrived to find Emma sitting alone at the kitchen table, tears streaming down her face. What's wrong? He asked, immediately kneeling beside her chair. Mother won't wake up, Emma whispered. I've been trying for an hour, but she won't open her eyes. Marcus felt his heart sink as he hurried to Sarah's bedside. She was still breathing, but her breath was so shallow that he had to lean close to detect it. Her skin was pale and cold to the touch. The doctor arrived within an hour of Marcus's urgent message. After examining Sarah, he pulled Marcus aside and spoke in low tones. It could be today, or it could be a few more days, the doctor said sadly, but not much longer. She's no longer in pain, which is a blessing. Make sure she knows she's not alone. Marcus thanked the doctor and returned to Sarah's bedside. Emma had climbed up on the bed and was curled up next to her mother, holding her hand and whispering quietly in her ear. What are you telling her? Marcus asked gently. I'm telling her about all the good memories we have, Emma said without looking up. I'm telling her about the time we picked wildflowers together, and when she taught me to braid my hair, and when she made me that special birthday cake. Marcus felt tears burning behind his eyes. That's perfect, sweetheart. I'm sure she can hear you. For the next 2 days, Marcus and Emma took turns sitting with Sarah. Marcus had sent word to the palace that he had a family emergency and would be away from duties until further notice. Lieutenant Hayes had responded with an understanding message and a promise to handle everything at the palace. On the 3rd day, Sarah opened her eyes for a brief moment. Her gaze was unfocused at first, then settled on Marcus's face. "Take care of our girl," she whispered, so quietly that he had to lean close to hear her. "I will," he promised. "I'll love her enough for both of us." Sarah's eyes moved to Emma, who was holding her other hand. "Be happy, my darling girl. Be brave and kind and happy." Emma nodded through her tears. "I will, Mother. I promise." Sarah smiled peacefully, then closed her eyes again. An hour later, her breathing stopped altogether. Emma cried for a long time, clinging to Marcus as if he might disappear too. He held her tightly and let his own tears fall freely. Sarah was gone, but she had given him the most precious gift imaginable, their daughter, and the chance to finally be the father he should have been all along. The funeral was small, but meaningful. A few neighbors attended, along with Sarah's elderly aunt and the local priest. Emma stood between Marcus and the aunt, holding both their hands as they said goodbye to Sarah. After the service, Marcus and Emma returned to the little house to pack Emma's belongings. She didn't have much. Some clothes, a few books, and a small wooden box that contained mementos of her life with Sarah. "Are you sure about Millhaven?" Marcus asked as Emma folded her dresses carefully into a travel bag. "It's going to be very different from here." Emma looked up at him with red, swollen eyes but a determined expression. "Mother wanted me to be happy," she said. "I think I can be happy there as long as you're with me." Marcus knelt down and pulled Emma into a hug. "I'll always be with you," he promised. "We're a family now, and families stick together." 2 weeks later, Marcus stood at the palace gates for the last time as captain of the Royal Guard. He was wearing civilian clothes and carrying a single bag of personal possessions. Lieutenant Hayes, who would be taking over as acting captain, stood beside him. "Are you sure about this, sir?" Hayes asked. "You're giving up a lot." Marcus looked through the gates at the busy street beyond, where Emma was waiting for him with a hired carriage that would take them to their new life in Millhaven. "I'm not giving up anything," Marcus said with a smile. "I'm finally gaining everything that really matters." 6 months later, Marcus stood on the cliffs overlooking the harbor of Millhaven, watching ships come and go in the distance. The salty sea breeze carried the sounds of seagulls and fishing boats, a pleasant change from the noise and bustle of the capital city. His new life had been everything Lord Chancellor Whitmore had promised and more. The embassy was housed in a beautiful stone building near the town center, and Marcus's duties as chief of security were challenging but manageable. He worked regular hours, which meant he could be home every evening to help Emma with her schoolwork and share meals with her. Emma had adapted to their new life with remarkable resilience. She had been nervous about starting school at first, having never been in a classroom with other children her age. But her natural intelligence and curiosity had quickly won over her teachers and classmates alike. She was particularly gifted in reading and writing, skills that Sarah had nurtured during their quiet evenings together. The house that came with Marcus's position was modest but comfortable, with 3 bedrooms, a small garden, and a view of the harbor from the kitchen window. Emma had claimed the room that faced the water, and she would often sit by the window in the evenings watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Marcus had worried that Emma might feel isolated, having lost her mother and been uprooted from everything familiar. But she seemed to thrive in Millhaven. She had made friends with several children in the neighborhood, and she loved exploring the tide pools and collecting shells along the beach. On this particular evening, as Marcus stood on the cliffs thinking about how much their lives had changed, he heard footsteps behind him. Emma appeared carrying a small basket of wildflowers she had picked on her way home from school. "The embassy chef asked me to find flowers for tomorrow's dinner table," she explained, showing him the colorful collection. "He said I have good taste in beautiful things." Marcus smiled at her pride in the small responsibility. "Those are lovely. Your mother would have been proud of your gardening skills." Emma was quiet for a moment, looking out at the ocean. She spoke about Sarah often, but always with love rather than sadness. The grief was still there, but it had evolved into something gentler, a warm appreciation for the time they had shared rather than bitterness about the time that had been cut short. "Do you think Mother can see the ocean from where she is now?" Emma asked thoughtfully. "I think she can see everything that makes you happy," Marcus replied. "And I think knowing that you're safe and loved brings her peace." Emma nodded, apparently satisfied with this answer. I wrote her a letter today, she said. I tell her about school and my friends and how you're teaching me to recognize different types of ships in the harbor. Marcus felt a familiar tightness in his throat. Emma had started writing letters to Sarah shortly after they moved to Millhaven. She would write them carefully in her best handwriting, then fold them up and keep them in the wooden box that held her other precious mementos. What did you tell her today? He asked. I told her that you're a good father, Emma said simply. I told her that you help me with my mathematics homework even though it's very difficult, and that you make funny faces when you're concentrating. I told her that you never get angry when I ask too many questions, and that you always listen when I want to talk. Marcus felt tears prick behind his eyes. In the months since Sarah's death, he and Emma had built a relationship based on honesty, patience, and genuine affection. It hadn't always been easy. There were still moments when Emma missed her mother intensely, and times when Marcus felt overwhelmed by the responsibility of raising a child alone. But they had learned to support each other through the difficult times. I also told her about the surprise, Emma added, grinning mischievously. Marcus raised an eyebrow. What surprise? Emma reached into her school bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. My teacher asked us to write stories about our families for the spring festival. I wrote about you and Mother and our adventures. She handed him the paper and Marcus unfolded it carefully. The story was titled, The Brave Guard and the Kitchen Maid, and was written in Emma's neat, careful handwriting. As Marcus read, he realized that Emma had somehow pieced together the romantic parts of her parents' story that they had tried to keep from her. She wrote about secret meetings in the palace garden, promises made under cherry trees, and a love that was strong enough to survive 15 years of separation. Emma, Marcus said carefully, how did you know about all of this? Emma blushed slightly. I listened sometimes when you and Mother thought I was sleeping, and Sarah's aunt told me some things when we visited her last month. She said I was old enough to know the whole truth about why Mother left the palace. Marcus looked at his daughter with new respect. She was more perceptive and mature than he had given her credit for. Are you upset that we didn't tell you everything? He asked. Emma shook her head. I understand why you wanted to protect me, but I'm glad I know the real story now. It makes me proud that my parents loved each other so much that they were willing to make sacrifices for each other, and for me. Marcus folded the story carefully and handed it back to her. Your mother would have loved reading this. You've inherited her gift for storytelling. Will you help me make it even better? Emma asked hopefully. I want to read it at the festival, and I want it to be perfect. I'd be honored to help, Marcus said. As they walked back toward town together, Emma chattering about her plans for the story and her excitement about the spring festival, Marcus marveled at how complete his life felt now. For years he had thought that duty and honor were the most important things a man could pursue. He had believed that personal relationships were luxuries that interfered with more important responsibilities. But watching Emma skip ahead of him on the path, her flower basket swinging from her arm and her laughter carried by the sea breeze, Marcus knew he had finally discovered what truly mattered. Love wasn't a luxury or a distraction. It was the foundation that made everything else meaningful. That night, after Emma had gone to bed, Marcus sat at his desk and wrote a letter of his own. It was addressed to Lord Chancellor Whitmore, thanking him for the opportunity that had changed both their lives. The position in Millhaven has exceeded all my expectations, Marcus wrote. Emma is thriving in her new environment, and I have found a sense of purpose that goes far beyond professional duty. For the first time in my adult life, I understand what it means to be truly content. He sealed the letter and set it aside to be posted in the morning. Then he walked quietly to Emma's room and looked in on her. She was sleeping peacefully, one hand still clutching the wooden box that held her letters to Sarah. Marcus thought about the weeping girl who had approached the palace gates 6 months ago, desperate to deliver a message that would force him to break protocol. That message had shattered his carefully ordered world and rebuilt it into something infinitely more precious. As he closed Emma's door softly and headed to his own room, Marcus whispered a quiet thank you to Sarah, wherever she was. She had given him not just a daughter, but a second chance at happiness, and this time he would not waste it.